Here's my challenge to Calvinists and once saved, always saved advocates. A lot of people running around saying if you think that you can lose your salvation or apostatize from the faith, you are a false teacher. You might want to do look up the concept of a wolf in the Bible. A wolf did violence to God's law. A wolf led the people astray into apostasy and sin. Not saying you could lose your salvation. Good luck trying to make a case that a wolf in the old covenant is different than a wolf in the new covenant in the text. Good luck with that. I'd like to see you try. Look, Psalm 119, the end of Psalm 119, Zechariah 3. The wolves led the people astray from the ways of God, not into once saved, always saved, or denying once saved, always saved. What a joke. Try to show me how Jesus' use of the wolf in Matthew 7, Matthew 5 through 7. What is a wolf? That's during the old covenant. And then the use of Peter talking about false prophets and false teachers and how he describes them. That's just one example. Is he saying something different than Jesus in 2 Peter? I don't think so. Peter was not using that term in a totally new way, talking about false teachers and false prophets, than Jesus did in Matthew 5 through 7. Look at the context. It's the old covenant, Old Testament context. You can't. Good luck with that. A wolf leads the people astray into sin. And so here's my challenge. I'm saying you can't find one person who didn't think you could, that it was impossible, that was teaching or thought you couldn't apostatize from the faith. I'm going to say in the first 300 years, but really more like, find me proof. I'm going to claim it. Nobody taught that you couldn't lose your salvation in the first 300 years of the church. Not one. Prove me wrong. There's a lot of people will tell me, Jamie, you're over the top. You can't say that. Yes, I can. Now make me look like an idiot. I'm open to being corrected. I just can't find it. People will be like, you can't say that. That's not true. Prove me wrong then. I am saying that. There isn't one person who thought you couldn't lose your salvation that we have record of. I want you to prove me wrong. I really do. Because a lot of people run around kind of, skimming the surface. Hey, guys. And what's my point? My point isn't that you should be a nervous wreck about losing your salvation. My point is you should be accurate about what the church taught and what the Bible teaches and be honest about it. I'm not advocating for making people nervous wrecks about losing. I think you have assurance. You can have assurance. You should have assurance as a Christian. But I'm sick of people skirting this issue. They say, well, this guy, and they'll quote some obscure quote. And I know that, they'll quote Clement of Rome. I can show that I'm not prepared to do it at the moment. I can show that Clement of Rome thought you could apostatize from his writings. And so there isn't anybody who thought you couldn't lose your salvation. Get over it or prove me wrong. I'll be corrected. I don't mind being corrected on this. But a lot of people kind of skirt the issue like maybe they did, maybe they didn't. No, they didn't. Prove me wrong. I'm making a bold claim. Prove me wrong. Or stop saying, well, they did kind of, and then they quote a quote where the person's using the text and then they're interpreting that the use of that text is how they interpret it, the person quoting the church father. Well, I can show that same church father talking about apostasy. In fact, they taught against the Gnostics who said you couldn't lose your salvation because you had knowledge. It's a Gnostic teaching. It really is. They thought they had special knowledge and that they were good no matter what, because their body was evil and the spirit was made pure by their knowledge. That's a Gnostic idea, it seems to me. I'm no scholar, but it looks to me like this thing is flipped upside down in people's minds. So I want to tear that to shreds. That's my goal, because I think it's misleading. And so that's my claim. Again, prove me wrong. You can't do it. I bet you can't do it. And then, so you're guilty of being dishonest, even though I haven't really substantiated anything. But my claim is, because a lot of people tell me you can't say that, don't say that, it's not necessarily true. And then they'll kind of use quotes, kind of cherry picked. And so my point is just that I kind of want to be proven wrong in a way. I'm okay with being wrong about this. I can't find it. And when I look at the church fathers, they're constantly fighting people who teach that error. that are Gnostic, as far as I can tell. So a lot of Calvinists will say, oh, this guy is kind of Calvinistic. No, he's just quoting the text that you guys think prove Calvinism or Calvinistic teaching. And I don't think Calvinists are like totally wrong about everything. Just the kind of the philosophical underpinnings are wrong, I think. I don't think Paul had Calvinistic particulars in mind when he quoted the verse. And when people quote those verses, I don't think that's what they're thinking. Nobody who writes 1 Corinthians 10:13 thinks Calvinistic particulars are true, in my opinion. I don't think Paul would have wrote that if he cared about the particulars that Calvinists harp on to us non-Calvinists. If the things in particular that non-Calvinists and Calvinists disagree on, if those particulars were true, 1 Corinthians 10:13 wouldn't have been written by Paul if he cared about that stuff. If that was even on his radar, there's no way he would. That's my argument. You can like squirm your way out of 1 Corinthians 10:13 with a really strained sort of presuppositional position about philosophy of sovereignty. But when you just take a step back and go, wait a minute, if all these particulars that Calvinists harp on us about were true, would he have written 1 Corinthians 10:13? And I'll read it for my audience sake here. Those who aren't familiar with. So the claim of the Calvinists is that there isn't two choices that are real ahead of us. Like God has determined all things that'll come to pass by his sovereign counsel of his will. And we do what we want to do because God's created a will in us to do a particular thing. All things, God's sovereign over all things that happen, which in their mind, that means he's determined what will happen. If that were true, if it were true that there wasn't two real options before us, would Paul have said this? If Paul was a Calvinist, quote unquote, meaning he was thinking like Calvinists do and not like a libertarian free will advocate would argue, would he say this? Let him who thinks he stands take heed lest he fall. No temptation has overtaken you except what is common to man. But God is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you're able. But with the temptation will make a way of escape that you may be able to bear it. God will not allow you to be tempted, but with the temptations will make a way of escape that you may be able to bear it. There's several ways you could read this passage, but it seems to me he's saying, look, God doesn't tempt you. But if you're a believer with the Holy Spirit, God makes a way of escape. And when you don't, it's because you chose not to do so. But God makes a way. So that sounds like two alternate possibilities to me. And even if you can squirm your way out of it by like, it's really just a presupposition saying, oh, it can't mean what it seems to say, it seems to me. So my point is just that if Paul was concerned about what Calvinists are concerned about regarding how we should understand freedom of the will and God's sovereignty, do you really think he would have said it this way? No way. There's just no way that would have been written. That's my opinion. And so again, you can apostatize if you don't stay faithful. That's my claim. And not any church father. Find me one church father, prove to me, show me. You can't do it. Doesn't exist. God bless. No hard feelings or anything. Just, I'm making a bold claim. Can you prove me wrong? Share this with people who make those claims. I will apologize for being wrong if you can do it. I don't think you can. So that's my claim. You can't show me one church father, in particular, let's say the first 300 years, that taught that you couldn't lose your salvation, or taught that once saved, always saved, or perseverance of the saints is true in opposition to the idea that you couldn't apostatize and lose your salvation. Is a possibility. The best you could possibly do is show that it's not clear. But there's so many teachings. They'll quote verses that sound like the verses people who believe that they quote, but I quote those verses too. I believe those verses too. We all do. You're just reading them wrong. And so when you see them quote those verses, you think they're saying what you believe. People do this with all kinds of stuff. You can't find them saying, you got to look for the quotes of them where they're not just quoting a verse. because we all believe the verses they quote. You need to find something where they say something specific, and that doesn't exist. It seems to me. Prove me wrong. You can't do it. Stop saying that maybe some people in the early church believed you couldn't lose your salvation. Not true. It's a lie. You're desperate. And the reason you won't prove it is because you don't want to prove it, because you know way deep down it's not true. No, I don't know. I'm just speculating now, but please prove me wrong. And if you can't, stop telling me not to say it. What you think about that?